The autumn sun settled low over the Colorado Plateau, casting long shadows across the weathered boards of the front porch. Lucas Garrett sat in the rocking chair he had built with his own hands 70 years ago, the wood worn smooth by decades of evenings just like this one. His fingers, gnarled and spotted with the marks of a century lived, rested on the armrest with the stillness of a man who had learned patience the hard way. 102 years of living had carved lines into his face. Each one told a story. Each one marked a battle fought, a choice made, a moment that could never be undone. Across from him, Daniel sat forward in his chair, 52 years old and carrying the weight of a grief too fresh to name. The boy, though boy was wrong for a man past 50, had returned from the war different, quieter. The kind of quiet that came from losing a son to distant gunfire and foreign soil. Michael had been 19 when the telegram arrived. 2 years had passed since then, but Daniel wore the loss like a second skin. It showed in the way he held his coffee cup without drinking, the way his eyes searched the horizon for answers that would never come. The evening stretched between them, comfortable in its silence. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals with lazy grace. In the distance, the Rocky Mountains stood sentinel, their peaks touched with the first snow of the season. The ranch sprawled below them, 320 acres of land Lucas and his wife had carved from wilderness with nothing but determination and a promise made in fire. Daniel set down his cup. The clink of ceramic against wood seemed too loud in the quiet. "Grandpa Lucas," he said, his voice carrying the roughness of a man who had been asking himself the same question for months. "Michael's been gone 2 years now. Still feels like yesterday. How did you keep going after losing Connor?" Lucas did not answer immediately. He reached for his pipe, a ritual as old as the chair beneath him. His fingers packed the tobacco with practiced precision, each movement deliberate. The match flared bright in the gathering dusk, and smoke curled upward into the cooling air. The smell was cherry wood and earth, familiar and grounding. "By learning that running from guilt doesn't honor the dead," Lucas said finally, "standing for something does." Daniel looked up confused. "I don't understand." Lucas studied his grandson, saw the pain there, the doubt. The same questions he himself had carried across half a lifetime before finding their answer. He thought of Connor Hayes, 20 years old and bleeding in the Arizona dust. He thought of a woman in an arroyo with fire in her eyes and desperation in her voice. He thought of a question that had changed everything. "Let me tell you about an Apache woman," Lucas said, his voice settling into the cadence of memory. "And a question that taught me what it means to be worthy of trust." Daniel leaned back, recognizing the shift. When his grandfather spoke in that tone, stories followed, stories that mattered. From inside the house came the sound of movement. Ayanna emerged onto the porch, 92 years old and still carrying herself with the pride of her people. Her hair, silver now but still worn in the traditional Apache braids, caught the last light of day. She wore a deerskin dress, the beadwork intricate and beautiful, each pattern telling its own story. Around her neck hung the turquoise necklace her grandmother had given her a lifetime ago. She looked at Lucas, then at Daniel. Understanding passed between husband and wife without words. She had heard the question. She knew which story needed telling. "This ought to be good," she said, settling into the third rocking chair. Her voice carried the accent of 3 languages blended into one. The story of how a foolish cowboy stopped in a place he should have ridden past. Lucas smiled, a small thing barely there. "Foolish is one word for it." "What's another?" Daniel asked. Lucas drew on his pipe, considering. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was younger somehow, harder, carrying the dust and distance of another time. "Necessary," he'd said. "It started like this. The image of the Colorado porch dissolved. The mountains faded. The comfortable evening gave way to something hotter, harsher, more unforgiving. The story began where all good stories must, at the moment when everything changed. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly in all directions, a landscape of red rock and saguaro cacti, standing like silent witnesses to human folly. Late September, 1877. 3 months since Marcus Redstone's murder. The territory was still raw, still bleeding from wars both finished and ongoing. The Apache people had been fighting for their homeland for decades. Most had lost. Some still resisted. The land remembered every drop of blood spilled across its stones. Lucas Garrett rode alone through this furnace of rock and scar, 32 years old, 6 feet of lean muscle and old scars, moving through the Sonoran Desert like a man with no destination and no reason to hurry. His buckskin mare, Sage, picked her way along the trail with the careful steps of a horse that had learned the desert's cruelty. 2 years. 2 years since he had watched Connor Hayes die in his arms. 2 years of drifting, of avoiding towns and people and anything that might require him to care again. Because caring meant loss. Caring meant arriving too late. Caring meant watching someone you had tried to protect bleed out in the dirt while calling your name. Lucas wore his grief like his gun belt. Always there, never acknowledged, heavy with the weight of what could not be undone. The Winchester model, 1873, rested across his saddle, 44-40 caliber, loaded with 15 rounds. Effective range 200 yards if you knew how to compensate for wind and drop. Lucas knew. The Army had taught him to kill at distance during the war. 15 years since Appomattox, but some lessons never faded. The Colt single-action Army revolver rode at his hip, 45 caliber, 6 rounds, deadly at 50 yards in practiced hands. His hands were practiced. Everything he owned sat in those saddlebags, jerky wrapped in canvas, a canteen half full, the water tepid and tasting of metal, a bedroll that had seen too many nights under stars, basic tools for field repairs. And beneath it all, wrapped in oilcloth, the last letter Connor had written before he died. Lucas never read it anymore. The words were burned into memory. The desert spoke its own language. Lucas read it the way other men read newspapers. The soil here was cracked and holding heat like a forge. A jackrabbit had crossed this trail 3 hours ago, moving fast, spooked by something larger. Coyote tracks ran parallel to the path, old enough that the edges had softened, but fresh enough to matter. And there, near the wash below, something else. Something that made Lucas pull Sage to a stop and sit very still. Fresh tracks. Human. Running. Lucas dismounted, studying the ground with the focus of a man whose life had often depended on reading what others missed. Moccasin prints, size 7, the stride showing exhaustion. A woman, probably Apache based on the footwear, moving fast but stumbling. The prints were deep on the ball of the foot, shallow at the heel. Running scared, and behind those tracks, 2 sets of boot prints, heavier, purposeful, closing in. Lucas closed his eyes and saw Connor's face, young, trusting, eager to please. Connor asking, "Mr. Lucas, how do I know if I'm doing right?" And Lucas answering, "When the choice is hard, ask yourself this, am I treating them the way I would want to be treated?" He opened his eyes, the tracks were still there. The decision waited. For 2 years, he had been running from exactly this kind of moment. The moment when someone needed help and he had to choose between the safety of distance and the danger of involvement. Because involvement meant caring, and caring meant the possibility of failing again. The sun beat down. Sage waited, patient. The desert offered no opinion. Lucas swung back into the saddle, his jaw set with the grim determination of a man who had just stopped running from himself. He followed the tracks. The arroyo opened before him like a wound in the earth, 40 feet deep and carved by water that no longer flowed. The walls were red sandstone, Permian era, holding the memory of ancient seas. The temperature hung at 107 degrees. Lucas knew because after 15 years in the West, he could read heat the way a sailor reads wind. It was 3:45 in the afternoon. The sun angle told him that. Time still mattered, even in the empty places. And there, pressed against the far wall of the arroyo, was the woman. Apache. No question. The high cheekbones and strong jaw were unmistakable. But her eyes were unusual, amber brown instead of the typical dark brown. Mexican heritage there showing through. Her skin was bronze, darkened further by sun exposure and desperation. Black hair hung in tangles around her face, one braid undone and trailing across her shoulder. She stood 5 feet 6 inches. Lucas estimated her weight at 130 pounds, though dehydration had stolen some of that. Athletic build, the muscle tone of someone who had worked hard all her life. Her hands were calloused, fingers strong despite their current trembling. The deerskin dress she wore was traditional Apache, made from 2 elk hides sewn together. It reached mid-calf with geometric beadwork across the chest and shoulders. Turquoise blue, ochre red, white, natural dyes, traditional patterns, crosses and diamonds, spiritual symbols. 4-inch fringe hung from the sleeves and hem, moving slightly in the hot breeze. But the right shoulder seam had been torn open. 8 inches of gaping fabric exposed her collarbone, the upper curve of her chest, the bruised skin of her shoulder. She held one hand across the opening, trying to maintain some dignity in violation. The other hand pressed against the rock wall behind her as if she could push through it to safety. Lucas cataloged the injuries with the clinical eye of a man who had tended too many wounded soldiers. Severe dehydration. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. The skin around her eyes had that sunken quality that spoke of fluid loss. 2, maybe 3 quarts down. Dangerous. Bruises covered her visible skin. The right shoulder bore a handprint-shaped mark, deep purple, maybe 2 days old. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to crush blood vessels. The left upper arm showed 4 finger marks, yellowing at the edges. 4 days old, healing. Right hip, a darker bruise from impact. 1 day old. She had fallen or been thrown. Both feet were cut and bleeding. No moccasins. She had lost them running, probably 2 days back based on the healing stage of the lacerations. Mesquite thorn scratches covered her right forearm, the wounds fresh. 12 hours old, no more. This woman had been running and fighting for days, and someone had been hunting her. Lucas dismounted 40 feet away. Slow, deliberate movements. His hands stayed visible, away from his gun belt. He took 2 steps forward, then stopped. 35 feet now. He did not close further without permission. His voice came out low and calm, the tone he had used with spooked horses and frightened recruits. "Ma'am, I'm not gonna hurt you." The woman stared at him. Her breathing was ragged, each inhale seeming to cost her. She calculated with the desperate mathematics of survival. One white man armed. Alone was better than a group, but alone did not mean safe. His scars told her he was a fighter. His horse stood calm, which meant the man was not volatile. Horses sensed character, but she had been wrong before. About men, about safety, about who could be trusted. Lucas waited, did not push, did not advance, just stood there with his hands visible and his shoulders relaxed and his eyes steady. Not staring, which would be aggressive, not darting, which would be deceptive. Just looking at her, waiting for her to decide. 30 seconds passed. A hawk cried overhead. Wind whispered through sagebrush. The desert held its breath. Then she spoke. Her voice came out cracked from thirst, but the words were clear. Each one carried the weight of every assault she had survived, every violation she had endured, every man who had looked at her and seen object instead of person. "Cowboy, do you just want my body like everyone else's?" The question hit Lucas like a fist to the gut. Not because it was crude, because it was honest, because it told him everything about the hell she had been living through, because it demanded an answer that would define what kind of man he actually was beneath all his scars and self-imposed isolation. He understood instantly. She was not asking if he found her attractive. She was asking if he saw her as human or as something to be used. She was asking if he was like the others who had hunted her. She was asking if there was any reason at all to trust him with even a moment of vulnerability. A memory flashed. Connor's voice from years past. "Mr. Lucas, what if someone asks you a hard question, one you know they need the truth for?" Lucas had answered carefully. "Then you give them the truth, even if it costs you, especially if it costs you. Because lies might feel easier, but they poison everything that comes after." Connor had nodded, understanding beyond his years. "And if they're different from you, different people." Lucas had met his eyes. "Doesn't matter. Human is human. Apache scout named Chado saved my life at Glorieta Pass. Bled the same color I do." Lucas looked directly at the woman's eyes. Not at the torn dress, not at the exposed skin, not at her body, at her. At the person standing in front of him, desperate and exhausted and terrified, asking a question that mattered more than anything else in this moment. "No, ma'am," he said. The words came out rough from disuse, but steady. "Certain. I'm not here for that." 5 seconds of silence followed. 5 seconds that felt like drowning, like falling, like waiting for a verdict that could go either way. Her eyes searched his face, looking for the lie, looking for the crack in the facade that would reveal his true intentions, looking for any reason to believe or any reason to run. Why should I believe you? Lucas understood the question. Trust was the most expensive currency on the frontier. Once you spent it wrong, you never got it back. Because I'm standing here, they're asking permission to help, he said, not taking what I want. You say no, I ride away. Your choice. The woman weighed her options. Death here alone, certain. Trust him. 70% chance of betrayal, 30% chance of survival. But 30% was better than zero. Somewhere in her memory, a voice spoke. Her husband Marcus, gentle and certain. Sometimes you have to risk trust, even when every instinct screams danger. And her grandmother Desba, fierce and unbreaking. Spirit guides protect those who choose bravely. She took one step forward. Her right foot moved, trembling with exhaustion. 3 seconds passed while she reassessed, looking for any sign that he would rush forward, take advantage, prove her fear correct. He did not move. Second step, left foot, wobbling slightly. Third step, right foot. She was 15 feet away now, close enough that Lucas could see the fever heat in her skin, close enough to count the individual beads on what remained of her necklace. Fourth step, she nearly fell. Her legs were giving out. Fifth step, 10 feet separated them. She stopped. Lucas extended his hand, palm up, offering, not grabbing, not demanding. I know a place, he said. Water, shelter. You'll be safe. Her hand hovered above his palm, trembling violently. The fever and exhaustion and 3 months of running all concentrated in that tremor. 5 seconds suspended. The choice crystallized. She placed her hand in his. The touch was electric with meaning. Her skin burned at 104 degrees, dry and papery with dehydration. Her hand felt impossibly light, the bones fragile beneath the skin. Her pulse raced visibly at her wrist, desperate and erratic. Lucas closed his fingers gently around hers. Supportive, not possessive. Steadying, not claiming. He did not pull, did not yank her forward, just held her hand and waited for her to choose the next step. This way, he said quietly. Stay close. She moved with him, each step an act of faith, each moment a gamble that he would prove himself different from every other man who had made promises. They climbed the Mesa Trail in silence, 800 yards at a 35-degree incline, gaining 280 feet of elevation. It took 45 minutes because of her condition. Lucas matched her pace without comment, without offering help she had not requested, understanding that she needed to maintain what dignity remained. The woman refused his arm when she stumbled. Apache pride drove her forward even when her body begged to quit. Her grandmother had taught her well. Show no weakness to strangers. Survive first, collapse later. Lucas respected the boundary, did not insist, did not treat her like she was fragile, just stayed close enough to catch her if she fell and far enough back to let her walk on her own terms. The Wiki-Up cave revealed itself gradually, hidden in a rock alcove 20 feet deep in the mesa wall. Pinyon pines provided natural cover. The opening measured 12 feet wide and 8 feet high. Inside, the remains of a traditional Apache shelter stood testament to the people who had used this place for generations. The framework consisted of willow poles bent into a dome shape, maybe 15 years abandoned. Most of the bare grass thatching had deteriorated, leaving gaps that let in light and air. But the structure itself remained sound, a ghost of habitation. Rock paintings covered the back wall of the cave. Red ochre, iron oxide, probably a century old or more. Mountain spirits danced across the stone. Deer and sun symbols spoke of hunts and prayers. This was a sacred site, a vision quest location, a place where the physical and spiritual worlds touched. The woman stopped at the cave entrance. Her hand reached out to touch one of the paintings, fingers tracing the outline of a spirit dancer with something like reverence. My grandmother Desba's band used this place, she said. First words beyond survival, first glimpse of the person beneath the desperation. This is where she taught me the medicine ways. She stepped inside like she was entering a church. Lucas gave her space. He built a small fire using techniques an Apache scout had taught him 15 years ago. Small and efficient, nothing wasteful. Tinder of dried grass and cedar bark, kindling of pencil-thin twigs, fuel of fist-sized branches, teepee structure. Flinted in steel, struck at 30 degrees, sparks catching in charcloth. The fire took hold in under 5 minutes, burning clean and hot and leaving almost no smoke. The woman watched him work. You make fire the way Apache do, small, efficient. White men usually make big, wasteful fires. Learned from Apache scouts, Lucas said, not looking up. They taught me that big fires make you a target. Small fires keep you alive. Something shifted in her expression. Recognition. Understanding. This white cowboy knew her people's ways. Respected them. That mattered. She sat on the cave floor, her back against the wall. Exhaustion finally claiming her, now that immediate danger had passed. Lucas retrieved his canteen and offered it. Drink slow, he said. Small sips. Too fast and you'll vomit. She took the canteen with both hands. Drank carefully, 4 ounces over the course of 10 minutes. Her body was learning to trust again, cell by cell. Lucas pulled jerky from his saddlebag. Chew long. Your stomach's been empty too long for fast eating. 2 ounces of dried meat. She ate like it was a feast. When she had finished, Lucas approached the question carefully. That shoulder needs treatment. Infection's starting. I can help, but only if you say yes. She studied him for a long moment, weighing, calculating, remembering his answer in the arroyo, remembering that he had kept his word about not touching without permission. You will not touch except to heal? You have my word. Then yes. She lowered the fabric from her shoulder. Lucas kept his eyes focused only on the wound, not on her skin, not on her body, just on the injury that needed treatment. The bruise was severe. Deep tissue damage, capillaries ruptured throughout a 4-inch diameter. Handprint shaped, 4 fingers and a thumb, clearly visible. 48 to 60 hours old based on the coloring. Early infection showed in the redness spreading from the edges. If left untreated, it would turn septic within days. Lucas cleaned the wound with whiskey. She hissed but did not cry out. He noted that. Strength beneath the exhaustion. He applied salve, a mixture of bear grease, yarrow, and pine resin that the Apache scouts had sworn by. Anti-inflammatory properties, they had said. He had seen it work too many times to doubt. Wrapping the shoulder took 8 minutes. Figure 8 pattern, secure but not constrictive. When he finished, Lucas stepped back immediately, creating distance, respecting boundaries. You have done this many times, she observed. War? War teaches you to patch people up, Lucas said. Doesn't teach you how to prevent the wounds in the first place. The first glimpse of his own guilt, showing through the cracks, she pulled the fabric back over her shoulder and studied him. Why do you wander alone, cowboy? Men like you have ranches, families, purpose. Why are you out here with nothing? Lucas hesitated. The answer was complicated, painful, but she had trusted him with her vulnerability. Perhaps he owed her the same honesty. Had all that once, he said. Lost it. How? He settled against the cave wall, staring into the small fire. The words came slowly, dragged up from places he usually kept locked. Had a partner, Silas Dalton, worked together at a ranch in Texas. I caught him rustling cattle, reported him. He got arrested. Lucas paused. The next part was harder. Case got dismissed. Corrupt sheriff took Dalton's money. Week later, Dalton's men killed a boy I was training. Connor Hayes, 20 years old. Whole life ahead of him. The woman went very still. What did you say? Dalton. Lucas looked up, surprised by her reaction. Silas Dalton. You know that name? Her voice came out shaking. The men hunting me. They work for Silas Dalton. Silence filled the cave, both of them processing this impossible connection. Your husband, Lucas said slowly. What did he see? She reached into a hidden pouch in her dress and pulled out a small leather journal. Worn, sweat-stained, precious. He left me this, said to take it to the federal marshal in Tucson if anything happened. Lucas opened the journal. Marcus Redstone's handwriting covered the pages. Dates, locations, names. June 1st, 1877. Guided survey team through Chiricahua Sacred Land. Discovered unauthorized mining operation, gold ore being extracted, treaty violation. Men involved: Silas Dalton, Horace Webb, Agent Morrison. June 10th, reported to Federal Marshal Crawford in Tucson. Lucas turned to the final entry. June 14th, if I die, tell Ayana. Find Lucas Garrett, former Union cavalry, worked Double R Ranch. Testified against Dalton, lost everything for truth. He's the only white man I trust to protect her. He understands justice matters more than safety. Lucas stared at the words. Read them again. Could not make them mean anything different. He knew my name, Lucas said, stunned. How? The woman Ayana, as the journal called her, spoke quietly. Marcus scouted for Army 6 years. He heard stories. The cowboy who stood against his partner, testified truth, lost his student for it. He said if something happened to him, I should find you. He planned this, Lucas said. He knew he might die. He knew you would run, and he knew where to send you. Not where, to whom. Ayana turned to the last page. Read this part. Lucas Garrett, if you are reading this, I know your guilt over Connor Hayes. I know you think you failed. You did not. You taught him honor. He died with honor. Now you have a chance to honor his memory. Protect Ayana, not as white man saving Indian woman, as equal warriors fighting the same enemy. She is strong. Let her be strong. Stand beside her, not in front of her. Marcus Redstone. Lucas sat back. The weight of it settled over him like a physical thing. Marcus had not just known about him. Marcus had understood him, had seen the guilt Lucas carried and offered him a path toward redemption. Not by rescuing someone weak, but by standing as an equal beside someone strong. He knew you would blame yourself, Ayana said softly. He knew you would need purpose. And he knew you would need a partner, Lucas finished. Not a savior. They looked at each other across the small fire. Two people destroyed by the same enemy. Two people brought together by a dead man's faith. Two people being offered a chance to stop running and start fighting. The journal must reach Marshal Crawford, Ayana said. Evidence of Dalton's crimes, treaty violations, murders. It's a trap, Lucas said. Dalton knows you will go there. He's waiting. Then we go smart. We go together. We do not hide anymore. We fight. Lucas studied her, saw the determination there, the strength Marcus had recognized. The woman who had asked him the hardest question and trusted his answer. You don't have to do this, he said. This is dangerous. She cut him off. Cowboy, I asked you a question in that arroyo. You gave an honest answer. Now I ask a different question. Will you stand beside me, as Marcus said? Not protect me like a child, but fight with me like a warrior? Lucas met her eyes, amber brown and fierce and absolutely certain. Yes, he said, as equals, partners. Ayana extended her hand, Apache fashion. Then we have a pact. We go to Tucson. We end Dalton. We honor Marcus and Connor. Together. They clasped hands. The grip was equal on both sides. Neither dominant, neither submissive. Partnership forged in understanding. Outside the cave, night settled over the desert. Stars emerged in impossible numbers, a blanket of light across the darkness. Somewhere in that vast empty space, hunters searched. Somewhere ahead, in Tucson, a trap waited. But inside the cave, two people who had lost everything found something neither expected. Purpose, partnership, a reason to stop running. Lucas took first watch. Ayana fell asleep within minutes, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion now that someone else stood guard. Lucas sat at the cave mouth, Winchester across his knees, and watched the desert night. Around midnight, he heard them. Horse hooves on rock, two riders moving through the darkness below. Voices carried in the still air. She can't have gone far. Find her. Dalton wants her alive, but he didn't say in what condition. Laughter, cruel and certain. Lucas's hand tightened on the Winchester. He could drop both of them from here, easy shots in the moonlight, but killing them would bring more hunters. Better they not know where to look. He waited, silent, patient, the way the war had taught him. The riders passed, their voices faded into distance. Lucas did not relax his watch. Behind him, Ayanna stirred. She had seen him spare them. You could have killed them, she whispered. Why did you not? Because killing them brings Dalton's whole gang, Lucas said. Better they don't know where we are. You think like Apache warrior. Choose survival over revenge. It was the first compliment she had paid him. Recognition of shared understanding. Dawn approached slowly, the way desert dawns do. Gray light bled into the sky before the sun itself appeared. Lucas felt the exhaustion in his bones. 2 years of drifting had not prepared him for this, for caring again, for having someone depend on him, for the terrifying possibility of failing one more person. But Marcus had faith in him, and Ayanna had placed her hand in his. And Connor's memory demanded that he be better than the man who had arrived too late. Ayanna woke stronger. Water and rest and safety had begun their work. She studied Lucas in the growing light. Tell me about Connor, she said, the boy you lost. So he did. He told her about the 17-year-old orphan who had arrived at the ranch looking for family, about teaching him to rope and ride and read the land, about the questions Connor asked, about the way the boy had looked at Lucas like he hung the moon, about the ambush that had stolen all of it. He was like a son, Lucas finished, his voice rough with the pain of it. And I made Dalton my enemy. Connor paid the price. Marcus was like that too, Ayanna said, always seeing the good in people, always trying to do right. It got him killed. They sat in the understanding of shared loss. Two people who had loved and lost and been running ever since. We stopped running today, Lucas said. Ayanna nodded. Today, we fight. They left the cave as the sun cleared the horizon, a day and a half of hard travel to reach Tucson, time enough to prepare for a confrontation with a man who had already taken everything from both of them. Time enough to become the warriors Marcus had believed they could be. Behind them, the sacred cave stood empty again, but the rock paintings remained. The mountain spirits danced on. The desert remembered everything. And somewhere in the space between what had been lost and what might be found, a question had been asked and answered honestly. That single moment of integrity would build everything that followed. The first day of riding taught Lucas something he should have already known. Ayanna was not a passenger. She was Apache. The land spoke to her in ways it would never speak to him, no matter how many years he spent learning its language. They rode double on Sage, the buckskin mare carrying both their weights with patient strength. Ayanna sat behind Lucas, her arms around his waist for balance. The physical proximity created an awareness between them, carefully unacknowledged. Professional distance maintained even as their bodies touched with each movement of the horse. The Sonoran Desert unfolded before them in brutal beauty. Saguaro cacti stood like sentinels, 40 and 50 feet tall, their arms indicating ages measured in centuries. The air shimmered with heat, temperatures climbing toward 108 degrees by mid-afternoon. Red rock formations rose from the desert floor, carved by water and wind, into shapes that seemed almost deliberate. Lucas navigated by the sun and his military training. But Ayanna read the land itself. She pointed to a plant with thorny branches and bright red flowers. Ocotillo. The wood makes good walking sticks. After rain, it blooms. Hummingbirds come. Lucas filed the knowledge away. He had ridden through this country for 2 years without learning what she knew by birthright. That one, she continued, indicating a sprawling green plant covered in paddle-shaped leaves. Prickly pear. The fruit is sacred, but the paddles can be crushed and applied to wounds. Stops infection better than anything white doctors use. I used something like that in my salve, Lucas said. Apache Scout taught me the recipe during the war. Ayanna went quiet for a moment, then carefully, what was the scout's name? Cheto, fought at Glorieta Pass, 62. Saved my life. The silence that followed felt different, heavier. Cheto was my grandmother Desba's cousin, Ayanna said finally. He died in 67. The shoulder wound never healed properly. Infection came back 3 years later. Lucas felt the connection settle into place. This woman behind him, her arms around his waist, was tied to the man who had taken a bullet meant for him 15 years ago. The world was smaller than he had imagined, the threads connecting people more intricate than he had known. He was a good man, Lucas said. Brave, honorable. All the best ones are dead, Ayanna replied. No bitterness in her voice, just truth. They rode in silence after that, each lost in their own memories of the dead. The canyon appeared without warning, the way dangerous things often do. A narrow passage between rock walls 60 feet high, only 35 feet wide at the base. The trail led straight through it. The alternative was 8 miles of open desert that would leave them exposed and visible for hours. Lucas pulled Sage to a stop, studying the passage. Every instinct from the war screamed trap. Narrow spaces meant ambush points. High walls meant no escape. But they needed to make time. Dalton's men were behind them somewhere, and Tucson was still more than a day's journey away. We go through, he decided. They were halfway into the canyon when Ayanna spoke. One word, urgent and quiet. Stop. Lucas reined Sage immediately. Did not question, did not ask why. Just trusted. Listen, she whispered. Lucas strained his ears, heard nothing but wind in the creak of saddle leather. But Ayanna's head was cocked, her entire body focused on something he could not detect. 2 horses, she said. Behind us, maybe 400 yards, coming fast. How can you possibly know that? Canyon carries sound. Your ears hear noise. Apache ears hear direction, distance, number. Before Lucas could respond, the rifle shot cracked through the narrow space. The bullet struck the canyon wall 2 feet from his head, sandstone exploding in a shower of fragments. Lucas's reaction was pure instinct. He drove his heels into Sage's flanks, sending the mare lunging forward. Behind him, Ayanna held tight, her arms locked around his waist. Another shot. This one ricocheted off the canyon floor. The whine of the ricochet, terrifyingly close. Garrett! A voice echoed from above. Male, rough, carrying the confidence of a man with the high ground. We don't want you. Give us the woman. Dalton just wants to talk. Lucas pulled Sage behind a boulder and swung down from the saddle. His Winchester came up smooth and fast, muscle memory from 1,000 drills. He fired twice at the canyon rim, aiming for the muzzle flash he had glimpsed. Not trying to kill, just making them keep their heads down. Ayanna dropped from the horse on the opposite side, landing in a crouch. She grabbed Lucas's Bowie knife from his belt without asking, the blade suddenly comfortable in her hand. I am not helpless cargo, Cowboy, she said. Never thought you were. Another shot from above. Then a second one from a different position. 2 shooters. Probably the same men who had passed beneath the cave last night, Jake and Tom, if Lucas had heard their voices correctly. Can you shoot? Lucas asked, eyes scanning the rim for targets. Not rifle, but I can fight close if needed. Lucas considered their options. Both attackers were 80 feet above them with clear fields of fire. The canyon offered some cover, but not enough. Staying here meant getting pinned down until they ran out of ammunition or patience. They needed an escape route. Ayanna was already scanning the walls, her eyes moving with purpose. She had grown up in this country, had played in canyons like this as a child, had learned every secret the rock could teach. There, she said, pointing to what looked like a shadow on the canyon wall. Apache trail. Follow me. She moved without waiting for confirmation. Lucas grabbed Sage's reins and followed, trusting her completely. The shadow resolved into a crack in the rock, barely 18 inches wide, invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Ayanna slipped into it sideways, moving with the fluid confidence of memory. Lucas followed, leading Sage. The mare balked at first, sensing the tight confines. But Lucas spoke to her in low tones, and she trusted him the way he had trusted Ayanna. The passage stretched for 120 feet through solid rock. Darkness swallowed them. The walls pressed close on both sides. Sage's breathing echoed loud in the confined space. Above them, they could hear Jake and Tom shouting, realizing their targets had vanished. Where'd they go? Oh, there's a crack in the wall. They went through. Too narrow for horses, but Sage was narrow enough. Barely. Her sides scraped rock on both sides, but she kept moving, following Lucas's voice and trusting his hands on her reins. They emerged on the far side of the mesa into open desert. The canyon and its ambushers were behind them now, separated by 120 feet of solid rock. Both of them stood breathing hard, adrenaline still singing in their veins. Lucas looked at Ayanna with new respect. How did you know that path existed? My grandmother brought me through here when I was 8. She said, Na'alnish, remember every trail, every cave, every water source. This land will protect you if you know it. Lucas understood then, Ayana was not surviving in this desert despite being Apache. She was surviving because she was Apache. This was her homeland. These rocks remembered her people, and she carried that knowledge in her bones. You just saved both our lives, he said. Now we are even, she replied. You saved me in the arroyo. I save you in the canyon. We are true partners. Lucas nodded. The balance had shifted. They were not protector and protected. They were equals in this fight. That mattered more than he had words to express. They rode through the afternoon, pushing hard. The sun beat down without mercy. Water became precious. They rationed it carefully, taking small sips every hour. The desert did not forgive carelessness. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the rocks in shades of amber and rose, they crested a small rise and saw it. An adobe structure, half collapsed, walls the color of sand and old blood. Ayana pulled in a sharp breath. Her hand on Lucas's shoulder tightened. I know this place, she said. Her voice carried wonder and grief in equal measure. The homestead sat near the mouth of Aravaipa Canyon, surrounded by cottonwood trees that spoke of water nearby. The building measured perhaps 18 feet by 24, constructed from adobe bricks and cottonwood vigas for the roof beams. The center section of the roof had collapsed inward, letting sky show through. But the walls stood strong, 18 inches thick, built to last centuries. This was not just a ruin, it was a memory made solid. Ayana dismounted before Lucas could offer help. She walked toward the structure slowly, reverently, like approaching a shrine. Her fingers traced the door frame, following carvings he could not read, but she clearly could. She stepped inside and spoke in Apache. Lucas did not understand the words, but he heard the emotion. Prayer and greeting and grief all woven together. He gave her space. Some moments belonged to one person alone. 20 yards from the homestead stood a cairn of stones, carefully placed, deliberately shaped, a grave marker. Lucas knew it before Ayana told him. She emerged from the structure and walked to the cairn, knelt beside it, placed her hand on the sun-warmed stones and spoke again in Apache. Then switching to English for Lucas's benefit, she said, Grandmother Desba, I return. I bring a white man, but he is a friend. He honors your teachings. Please guide us. Lucas stood at a respectful distance, kept watch for pursuers, let Ayana have this moment with her dead. When she finally spoke to him, her voice was thick with suppressed emotion. I came here every summer as a child. While my band moved with the seasons, grandmother stayed. She refused to leave when soldiers came for removal. What year was that? 1852. I was 2 years old. They took my mother, my aunts, cousins to San Carlos Reservation. 200 miles away, grandmother stood in that doorway with a rifle, told the soldier captain this was her home. Her mother's bones were in that hill. Her daughter took first steps in that dirt. If they wanted her on a reservation, they would have to carry her dead body. What did the soldiers do? The captain looked at her, old woman alone, harmless to his eyes. He said, keep your hovel, old woman, not worth the ammunition. They left her. Lucas heard the pride in Ayana's voice, the fierce love for a woman who had chosen death over surrender. She lived here alone until 65, 13 years. Every summer, my mother would sneak me away from the reservation to visit. Grandmother taught me medicine, plants, Apache ways the reservation schools tried to erase. Ayana moved through the homestead, touching walls, remembering. She told Lucas about learning to identify 47 medicinal plants, about tracking game by droppings, about predicting weather by cloud formations, about the stories Grandmother Desba had told, connecting her to ancestors stretching back through time. She died in 65, winter. I was 15, came to visit and found her in that corner. Ayana pointed to the northeast section of the room. Wrapped in blanket, peaceful, died in her sleep in her home, free. She refused to be a reservation Indian. She died Apache, on Apache land. The tears came then, 3 months of grief finally breaking through. Not just for her grandmother, but for Marcus, for the life she had lost, For everything stolen by Dalton's greed, Lucas sat on the porch step, kept watch, gave her the dignity of private sorrow. This was not his moment to comfort. This was her moment to feel. 10 minutes passed, the sun continued its descent. The desert began to cool. Ayanna emerged, eyes red but resolved. She knelt at the grave cairn again, placed a fresh turquoise stone among the others, and spoke a prayer Lucas could not understand but felt the power of. Then, she turned to him. "Thank you for giving me time. Your grandmother's memory deserves respect." She studied him for a long moment, seeing something that satisfied her. "I need to search the house. Marcus told me something was hidden here." Lucas followed her inside. She moved directly to the northeast corner, knelt, felt along the floorboards with practiced fingers until she found what she sought. A loose board. She pried it up with the Bowie knife, revealing a hidden cache beneath. The contents made Lucas's breath catch. Marcus's complete journal, much thicker than the portion Ayanna had shown him. 3 months of detailed entries, maps of mining locations, sketches of equipment, names, dates, amounts of gold stolen, a record of systematic theft and murder, photographs, tintype images showing Dalton meeting with a fat man Lucas assumed was Horace Webb, images of mining operations in mountain locations, wagons loaded with ore, telegraph copies, stolen from some office, showing coordination between Dalton, Webb, and someone named Morrison, messages about eliminating witnesses, about maintaining the fiction of legal operations, legal documents, forged treaty claims, false mineral rights, records of bribes paid to territorial officials, and a letter, sealed, addressed to Ayanna in Marcus's handwriting. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Lucas watched her eyes move across the page, watched tears start again, watched her expression cycle through grief, wonder, and something like vindication. She handed him the letter without speaking. "My beloved Naelnish, if you read this, I am gone. Do not grieve long. I chose to speak truth knowing the cost. This is the Apache way. Speak truth, accept consequences. I have documented Dalton's crimes, but evidence alone will not bring justice. The system is corrupted. You need a warrior beside you. Find Lucas Garrett. I served with men who knew him in the war. They say he never breaks his word, never abandons his people, would die before betraying honor. He testified against Dalton in '75, lost in everything. Dalton's men killed the boy he trained, Connor Hayes. Same enemy that killed me. Same wound. When you find Garrett, test him. Ask a question that reveals character. If he gives an honest answer when lying would be easier, trust him." I researched Garrett for 2 months, talked to men who served with him, read court transcripts, watched him from distance when he came to Tucson in April of '77. He is worthy. He is. Do not let him treat you as weak woman needing rescue. You are Apache warrior. Desba's granddaughter. Demand he stand beside you, not in front. 2 warriors, equal partnership, fighting the same enemy. This is how you win. I love you. Fight for justice, live free. Your husband, Marcus Redstone. Written June 14th, 1877. The day before I die. Lucas read the letter twice. The implications settled over him like physical weight. Marcus had not just known about him. Marcus had researched him, had watched him, had planned this meeting down to the specific question Ayanna should ask. The test Lucas had not known he was taking. "He told me exactly what to ask you," Ayanna said, her voice shaking. "Ask a question that reveals if he sees you as human or object. If he answers with respect, trust him completely." "The question in the arroyo," Lucas said slowly. "Do you just want my body like everyone else?" That was Marcus's test? Ayanna nodded. I was terrified. "I thought you would say yes like every other man." "But you said no. You passed." The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of the dead man's faith. "He trusted you before we met," Ayanna said, "and he was right to." There was more to the letter, a section addressed directly to Lucas. He read it with growing understanding of the man Marcus Redstone had been. "Lucas Garrett, I know your guilt over Connor Hayes. I know you think you failed him. You did not. You taught him to stand for what is right. He died with honor because of you. Now you have a chance to honor his memory. Protect Ayanna. Not as white savior, as equal warrior. She is strong. Desba taught her survival, medicine, fighting. Let her be strong. I could not save her. You can. Not by fighting for her, but by fighting with her. When you face Dalton, remember this. Revenge is not justice. Connor would want justice. So do I. Stand with Ayanna. Honor both our memories. Marcus Redstone. Lucas set the letter down carefully. Looked at Ayanna across the dim interior of the homestead. Saw her watching him, waiting for his response. He understood, Lucas said. He knew I would blame myself, knew I would need purpose. He gave us both what we needed, Ayanna replied. Me, a partner instead of a savior. You, a chance to honor Connor properly. Can I live up to that faith? You already have, from the moment you gave the right answer in the arroyo. The moment stretched, fragile and important, two people recognizing that they had been brought together by forces larger than chance, by a good man's dying wish, by the need for justice in a world that valued gold over truth. Then Lucas heard it, the sound that shattered their brief peace. Hoofbeats, multiple horses, coming fast. He moved to the window, counted silhouettes against the setting sun. 4 riders, more than had ambushed them in the canyon. Dalton was escalating. They found us, Ayanna said. Statement of fact, not panic. Inside, Lucas ordered. Now. They retreated into the homestead. Lucas positioned himself at the west window. Ayanna took the east, both armed now. She had picked up a fallen attacker's revolver during their flight from the canyon. Lucas had shown her the basics. Point, squeeze, control the recoil. The riders surrounded the structure. Professional, experienced. These were not amateurs playing at violence. These were men who had done this before. A voice called from outside. Jake Reeves, the one from the canyon. Mrs. Redstone, Mr. Garrett, let's talk like civilized folks. Lucas kept his Winchester aimed at the sound of the voice. Talk from there. We're listening. Mr. Dalton authorized me to make an offer, $1,000 in gold coin. You hand over that journal, walk away, live your lives, no hard feelings. $1,000, a fortune, equivalent to $26,000 in future money. The kind of sum that could buy a ranch, a new life, freedom from all of this. Ayanna stepped into the doorway. Visible, deliberate, no longer hiding. The effect was electric. Lucas saw Jake's posture shift, saw the other riders react. They had been chasing a ghost. Now the ghost stood before them in flesh and blood, in defiance. Tell Silas Dalton, Ayanna said, her voice carrying across the desert evening, that my husband's blood is not for sale. His life was worth more than all the gold in Arizona. I am coming for Dalton. I will see him hang for murder. This is my promise. Jake's response came quickly. Ma'am, you're being unreasonable. Dalton's a powerful man. He owns the marshal, the judge, half the territorial government. Then the twist, the information that changed everything. Fact is, ma'am, there's a warrant for your arrest. Murder of Marcus Redstone. We've got witnesses. 3 Apache from San Carlos. Ready to swear you killed him in a domestic quarrel. You walk into Tucson, you hang. Lucas felt Ayanna go rigid beside him. The trap was deeper than they had imagined. Dalton had not just framed the narrative. He had bought witnesses, had corrupted the legal system itself. Witnesses? Ayanna's voice shook with fury. Lies! Paid liars! Doesn't matter if they're lying, Jake called back. Matters what the judge believes, and Judge Harrison believes whoever pays him most. Lucas and Ayanna exchanged a look. The plan to simply deliver the journal to the marshal had just become infinitely more complicated. Tell Dalton we're coming anyway, Lucas shouted, and we'll expose his whole operation in front of so many witnesses he can't buy them all. Jake's laughter echoed across the desert. Your funeral, Garrett, literally. Then the attack began. One of the riders, a man Lucas did not recognize, threw something burning toward the homestead. A torch, kerosene-soaked rag wrapped around wood. It arced through the air and landed on the thatched portion of the roof still intact. Fire caught immediately. Hungry, spreading fast, Lucas fired, hit the torch thrower in the shoulder. The man spun and dropped, wounded but not dead. Return fire peppered the adobe walls. Bullets punched through in places, sending chips of dried mud flying. Smoke began filling the interior. The temperature rose as flames consumed the ancient thatching. They could not stay, but the four attackers had positioned themselves to cover every exit. Ayanna coughed through the smoke. "Cowboy, there is a way out. Grandmother built an escape tunnel during the Apache Wars." "Where?" "Under the hearthstones. Help me." Together they pried up the flat stones that formed the hearth, revealed a dark opening dropping 4 feet down into earth. A tunnel entrance, hand-dug, shored with cottonwood posts. 26 years old, but still stable. Lucas fired several rounds through the windows, keeping the attackers honest, giving Ayanna time to slip into the darkness below. She disappeared into the tunnel. Lucas followed, pulling stones partially back into place to hide their escape route. The tunnel was tight, 3 feet wide, 4 feet high. Lucas had to crouch walk, his 6-foot frame not built for spaces like this. The Winchester scraped against the walls. Behind them they could hear shouts of discovery. "They're gone! Building's empty! Find them!" But finding the tunnel entrance would take time. Time they used to crawl through 140 feet of earth and darkness. Ayanna led. She had practiced this as a child, grandmother Desba drilling her. Know your escape routes. Practice in darkness. Assume the enemy will come at night. Lucas followed the sound of her movement. Trust absolute. She knew where she was going. He just had to keep up. They emerged in an arroyo bank, hidden by creosote bushes. Twilight had fallen while they crawled. The sky was purple and orange, a beautiful and indifferent to human struggle. Behind them, the homestead burned. Black smoke rose into the evening air. The attackers were shouting, searching, frustrated. "We need to move," Lucas said. "Now. No horses. We run." They ran into the desert as darkness fell, used the failing light to gain distance. Ayanna chose the path, reading terrain Lucas could barely see. The pursuers followed but lost the trail in the darkness. After 2 hours of hard running, they collapsed in a canyon shelter, 5 miles from the burning homestead. Safe for the moment, exhausted, bleeding from new cuts, but alive, and still carrying Marcus's journal. The evidence that would bring Dalton down, if they could live long enough to deliver it. Lucas's shoulder wound had reopened during the crawl through the tunnel. Blood seeped through his shirt. The pain was sharp and getting worse. Fever began to build. Ayanna took charge without asking permission. She gathered materials by moonlight. Yerba mansa from a seep in the canyon wall. Willow bark for pain, spiderweb for bandage. She chewed the plants into a poultice the way grandmother Desba had taught her. "Take off your shirt," she ordered. Lucas obeyed, too tired and feverish to argue. She cleaned the wound with water from the seep, applied the poultice, bound it with strips torn from her underdress, covered him with the blanket she carried in her burden basket. The roles had reversed. Now she protected him. Now she stood watch while he shook with fever and fought infection. In his delirium, Lucas spoke, words tumbling out unfiltered. "Connor, I'm sorry. Should have been there. Always too late." Ayanna's voice soothing and certain. "Shh, cowboy. Rest. Connor knows you loved him. That is enough. Why did you trust me? In the arroyo. Could have run." Her answer quiet in the darkness. "Because when you looked at me, you did not see Apache, did not see woman, did not see body. You saw me. You saw a person. That is rare. Worth risking trust." The fever broke around 3 in the morning. Lucas woke to find Ayanna sitting watch, her back against the canyon wall, her eyes scanning the darkness with tireless vigilance. "You stayed awake all night," he said, his voice rough but clearer. "You did the same for me at the Wiki-Up. We are even. Thank you for the medicine, for everything, for treating you as you treated me, with respect." They rested through the pre-dawn hours. When the sun rose, they continued north on foot. Tucson was still a day away. They had no horses, limited water, and pursuers who would not quit. But they had each other, and Marcus's journal, and a shared purpose that burned brighter than any fever. The Gila River appeared before them near noon, swollen with spring runoff from the Sierra Nevada mountains. 100 feet wide and running fast, 5 feet deep in places. The current moved at 8 miles per hour, deadly and uncaring. They had to cross. The alternative was a 15-mile detour that would cost them time they did not have. Lucas studied the water, calculated angles, looked for the safest crossing point. "We go together," he said. "Hold on to each other. Angle with the current. Don't fight it." They entered the water hand in hand. The cold shocked the breath from Lucas's lungs. The current grabbed at them immediately, stronger than he had anticipated. They angled downstream, fighting to reach the far bank. Halfway across, disaster struck. The bottom dropped away. Deep water, strong current. The river claimed them, pulling them under, tumbling through churning water, disoriented, lungs burning. Lucas lost his grip on Ayana's hand. He surfaced, gasped, looked around frantically, could not see her. Then he spotted her, 20 feet downstream, going under. She could not swim, had never learned. Lucas dove without thought. The current fought him, his clothes dragged at him. His wounded shoulder screamed. None of it mattered. He found her hand in the churning water, pulled her up, got his arm around her chest from behind, kicked hard for the surface. They tumbled together down the river, bouncing off rocks, swallowing water. The world reduced to cold and chaos and the desperate need for air. Lucas's boots found purchase on something solid, a boulder. He used it to push them toward the far bank. Shallower water. His feet found gravel. He dragged Ayana with him, stumbling toward shore. They collapsed together in the mud, coughing up river water, shaking with cold and adrenaline. Marcus's journal, wrapped in oilcloth, had survived. Everything else was soaked, but they were alive. Ayana looked at him with something new in her eyes. "You dove in without thinking. Could have drowned." "Told you in the arroyo," Lucas said, still catching his breath. "I'm not here for your body. I'm here for you. Every part, your strength, your mind, your Apache spirit. Losing you was never an option." What drives a white cowboy to risk everything for an Apache widow he barely knows? Lucas met her eyes, spoke the truth he had been carrying since the sacred cave. "Because Marcus trusted me with what mattered most to him. You. Because Connor would want me to protect someone who needs protecting. Except you don't need protecting. You need someone to stand with you. That's what I'm doing." Ayana's next question came quietly, carefully, like she was testing ground that might not hold. "When this is over, cowboy, when Dalton is dead or in jail, will you stay? Not from duty to Marcus or guilt over Connor, but because you want to?" Lucas looked at her, soaked and exhausted and beautiful in her fierce determination, saw the question beneath the question, saw the possibility of something neither of them had expected to find. "I already know my answer," he said, "but first we finish this. Together." The recognition passed between them unspoken, feelings forming, not acted upon. The stakes were too high for complications, but acknowledged, accepted, waiting for a tomorrow that might never come. They reached Tucson as the sun began its descent. The town sprawled in a valley, 3,000 souls trying to build civilization in the desert. Adobe buildings mixed with wooden structures. Mexican influences dominated the architecture. The smell of cooking fires and animals, and humanity pressed close. They found Rosa Delgado's cantina in the Barrio Viejo, the Mexican quarter. Rosa answered their knock with suspicion that turned to shock. "Dios mío, na alnesh. They said you were dead." She pulled them inside quickly, fed them, gave them information that confirmed their worst fears. Dalton had arrived 3 days ago, playing the role of respectable businessman. The territorial reception was tonight. Every important person in Tucson would be there, including Dalton, including the corrupt officials, including Marshall Crawford, isolated and unable to act without evidence. The warrant for Ayana's arrest was real. The witnesses were bought and waiting. The trap was set, but tonight also represented their best chance, a public confrontation. Too many witnesses for Dalton to control. If they could get Marcus's journal to Marshall Crawford in front of the crowd, if they could force the truth into the open, they might have a chance. Rosa provided disguises, a suit for Lucas that made him look like a gentleman instead of a drifter, a Mexican dress and rebozo for Ayana to hide her Apache features long enough to get inside. As they prepared, Ayana struggled with hiding her heritage. It felt like betrayal. Lucas understood. "Your grandmother taught you to survive. This isn't hiding, it's strategy. Different battles need different weapons. Ayanna nodded, reframed the act in her mind, not concealment. Preparation. War paint before the final battle. Night fell. The territorial reception began. Music drifted from the hall, laughter and conversation. The sound of people who believed they were safe, that power and money made them untouchable. Lucas and Ayanna looked at each other across Rosa's small room. Tomorrow they would have a new life or no life at all. Tonight they would walk into fire. Ready? Lucas asked. For Marcus, for Connor, for justice. They walked into the Tucson night toward a confrontation 70 years in the making, toward truth and consequence, toward the answer to a question asked in desperation and answered in honor. The hunt was ending. The reckoning was about to begin. The Territorial Hall stood as a monument to Arizona's aspirations. Built just 2 years prior in 1875, it rose from the Tucson earth in Spanish colonial revival style, all whitewashed adobe and fired brick, with graceful arches and a courtyard designed to impress visiting dignitaries and territorial citizens alike. Tonight it blazed with light and life, torches burning in iron sconces, the fountain in the courtyard center casting dancing shadows across the gathered crowd. 150 souls had assembled for the territorial reception. The elite of Arizona, or what passed for elite in a territory still raw and bleeding from conflict. Mine owners in expensive suits stood beside army officers in dress uniforms. Merchants who had made fortunes, supplying the military, mingled with lawyers who had grown wealthy navigating the complex web of land claims and treaty disputes. Territorial officials moved through the crowd with practiced ease, accepting congratulations and collecting favors owed. At the center of it all stood Silas Dalton, 48 years old and dressed in a black suit that had cost $80, the equivalent of $2,000 in future money. Dalton played his role to perfection. The successful businessman, the generous benefactor, the pillar of the community who had just donated $5,000 to the Territorial Road Fund. His gray hair was neatly trimmed, his beard carefully shaped. A gold watch chain stretched across his vest, catching torchlight with each movement. He laughed at jokes that were not funny, complimented wives on dresses he did not notice, discussed mining investments and railroad prospects with the fluency of a man who had spent years learning to sound legitimate. Nobody looking at him would guess he had ordered murders, that he had built his fortune on stolen gold and broken treaties, that he was a snake wearing human skin. Beside him, Horace Webb sweated despite the cool evening air. 62 years old, overweight, the territorial secretary carried his corruption openly in the nervous way his eyes darted around the crowd, in the way he drank champagne too quickly and laughed too loudly at Dalton's stories. Webb provided the political cover, the forged documents, the official sanction for what was fundamentally theft. Indian Agent Morrison lurked near the edges of the gathering. Jan on gathering, 50 years old and drinking heavily. He was the weakest link and knew it. He had accepted $5,000 to allow access to Apache sacred land, had looked the other way while treaty-protected territory was violated. Now he avoided eye contact with everyone, staying near the exits, ready to run if things fell apart. Marshal James Crawford stood alone in the West Arcade, separate from the celebration. 55 years old, with the weathered face of a man who had spent decades enforcing law in places where law was just a suggestion. Former Texas Ranger, current federal marshal. He wore plain clothes instead of his dress uniform, and his United States Marshal badge was the only decoration he carried. Crawford was not socializing because he did not belong to this world. He served federal justice, not territorial politics. He could not be bought, which made him dangerous to men like Dalton and useful to people who still believed the law meant something. But he was isolated, outnumbered, unable to act without evidence solid enough to overcome the corruption surrounding him. 6 of Dalton's men moved through the crowd disguised as servants and guards. Jake Reeves, recovered from his shoulder wound, carried a tray of champagne glasses while his eyes tracked every entrance. Tom Barlow stood near the main doors, his hand never far from the revolver hidden under his jacket. Colt Mathis, limping slightly from the leg wound Ayanna had given him, positioned himself by the west exit. 3 others whose names Lucas did not know completed the net. They were waiting, watching, ready to close the trap the moment their target appeared. Lucas Garrett entered through the main doors at 7:15. The borrowed suit felt strange after years in trail clothes, but it served its purpose. He looked like a gentleman. Respectable. Unthreatening. Just another attendee at a territorial function. He took a glass of champagne from a passing tray. Did not drink it. Needed his head clear. But holding it gave him something to do with his hands, a reason to move through the crowd without drawing attention. His eyes cataloged everything with military precision. 6 visible threats, multiple exits, sight lines, cover positions, the layout of the courtyard with its fountain providing both concealment and obstacle, the second-floor balcony overlooking the main gathering space, the narrow corridors leading deeper into the building. He located Marshal Crawford isolated in the West Arcade and moved in that direction with deliberate casualness. When he reached Crawford's position, Lucas stood beside him without preamble. Spoke quietly, his voice pitched to carry only to the marshal's ears. "Marshal Crawford?" Crawford turned, his face showing nothing. "Do I know you?" "Name's Lucas Garrett." "You don't know me, but you know my testimony." Testified against Silas Dalton, 1875. Cattle rustling case. Crawford's eyes sharpened with recognition. "That case got dismissed. Corrupt sheriff." "I know. I also know you're federal, not territorial. Can't be bought." "What do you want, Mr. Garrett?" "I have evidence, new evidence, about Marcus Redstone's murder and about Dalton's current crimes. Mining operations on protected Apache land, treaty violations, systematic theft, multiple murders to cover it up." Crawford studied him carefully. "Redstone case is closed. Apache woman killed him. We have witnesses. You have paid liars. The real witness is here tonight, with her husband's journal, complete documentation, 3 months of detailed evidence. When she walks through that door in 5 minutes, things are going to get loud. Be ready to act. Choose which side you're on now, law or gold." Crawford's jaw tightened. "You're asking me to trust you on faith? I'm asking you to wait 5 minutes and judge the evidence yourself. Then decide if you're a real lawman or just another man on Dalton's payroll." The insult landed as intended. Crawford's hand moved toward his gun, then stopped. He recognized the challenge for what it was, a test of character. "5 minutes," Crawford said. "But if you're playing me, Garrett, there won't be anywhere in this territory you can hide." "I'm not playing anyone. Marcus Redstone trusted you. So do I." Lucas moved away, positioning himself on the second-floor balcony where he had a clear view of the courtyard below. His hand rested on the Colt hidden under his jacket. His eyes tracked Dalton's men. Counted down the seconds until everything changed. 5 minutes felt like drowning, like falling, like every moment before a battle when you knew the shooting was about to start and there was nothing to do but wait for it. Then Ayanna walked through the side entrance. She entered with Rosa, both women dressed in Mexican style. The rebozo covered Ayanna's hair, hiding the traditional Apache braids. The full skirt and white blouse could have belonged to any Mexican woman in Tucson. For a moment, she was invisible in the way only the dismissed and overlooked can be invisible. Rosa guided her through the crowd toward the courtyard fountain. Conversations continued around them. The music played on. Nobody noticed or cared about 2 Mexican women moving through a gathering of territorial elite. Then Ayanna stopped walking. She stood in the center of the courtyard, surrounded by 60 people within 20 feet. Open space in all directions. No cover, no escape routes. Commitment absolute. She reached up and removed the rebozo from her head. Her hair cascaded down, the traditional Apache braids unmistakable. She let the shawl fall from her shoulders, revealing the deerskin dress beneath. Beadwork caught torchlight, turquoise and ochre, red and white, geometric patterns telling stories in a language most of these people would never learn. The turquoise necklace her grandmother had given her gleamed at her throat. She stood revealed. Apache. Unmistakable. Deliberately visible. The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. Voices rose in shock and recognition. "It's her! The Apache woman! The murderer! What is she doing here?" The crowd parted, creating a circle around her. 15 feet of empty space in all directions. Fear and prejudice made physical. Nobody wanted to stand too close to the savage, the killer, the thing that did not belong in their civilized gathering. Ayana's voice cut through the rising noise, clear, strong, absolutely fearless. My name is Ayana Naelnish of the Warm Springs Apache. My husband was Marcus Redstone, United States Army scout, honest man, murdered for speaking truth. His silence descended like a physical weight. Every conversation stopped. The music trailed off into nothing. 150 people froze. Attention riveted on the woman who should not exist, the ghost who refused to stay buried. You have been told I killed my husband, Ayana continued, her words carrying to every corner of the courtyard. You have been told I am mad with grief. You have been told I am dangerous savage. All lies. Lies told by one man. She pointed directly across the courtyard, her finger aimed like a weapon. Silas Dalton. Every head turned. Dalton stood frozen, champagne glass halfway to his lips. His face drained of color, then flooded red with rage and shock. His eyes found Lucas on the balcony above, and recognition hit like a hammer blow. The two men who had destroyed him, together, in his moment of triumph. But Dalton was a survivor. He had not built his empire by panicking. He recovered his composure with visible effort, setting down the champagne glass with hands that barely trembled. Ayana held up Marcus's journal, leather-bound and thick with evidence. This journal documents the truth. Illegal gold mining on Apache sacred land, violation of federal treaties, theft of government property, bribes paid to territorial officials, and murder. Murder of witnesses who threatened to expose these crimes. She turned slowly, addressing the entire crowd now, making them all witnesses to what came next. My husband discovered Silas Dalton's operation in the Chiricahua Mountains. He documented everything: dates, locations, amounts of gold stolen, the names of every man involved. He reported this to federal authorities 3 months ago. Her voice hardened. 1 week later, he was shot from behind on the trail to Tucson. They say I killed him. I ask you this. What wife murders her husband in rage, then runs for 3 months instead of claiming self-defense? What sense does that story make? Logic planted seeds of doubt in the crowd. Murmurs of agreement started, people beginning to question the narrative they had been fed. Dalton's voice cut through the growing noise. Loud, commanding. The voice of a man who had spent years learning to dominate rooms. Marshal Crawford, that woman is wanted for murder. There's a warrant signed by Judge Harrison. Arrest her immediately. All eyes turned to Crawford. The marshal stepped forward from the arcade, his hand on his gun, but not drawing it yet. He looked between Ayana and Dalton, between the journal she held and the crowd of powerful men surrounding the accused. Ma'am, there is a warrant, Crawford said carefully. I'm obligated to take you into custody. I will surrender, Ayana replied, her voice steady as stone. After I speak, after these people hear what their respectable businessman has done, after truth is spoken in the open, where it cannot be buried. Dalton's face twisted with fury. Marshal, do your duty. She's a criminal, a savage, a murderer. I am a witness, Ayana said. Each word precise, deliberate. And I will be heard. The crowd was torn now, fascinated by the drama unfolding. This was better than theater. This was real violence threatening to erupt. Real power being challenged. Real secrets about to be exposed. That was when Lucas descended from the balcony. He walked down the stairs slowly, every eye tracking his movement. The crowd parted before him the way crowds always parted before armed men who moved with purpose. He crossed the courtyard and stood beside Ayana, not drawing his weapon, just taking his place at her side as he had promised in the sacred cave. Standing beside her, not in front, not behind, beside. Dalton saw him, and something broke in the older man's carefully maintained facade. Lucas Garrett. His voice shook with barely controlled rage. I should have known. You destroyed my life once with your lies. Come to finish the job? Lucas's response came calm and level, the tone of a man who had nothing left to prove and nothing left to lose. Didn't destroy your life, Silas. Told her the truth about your crimes. Not my fault the court let you walk on a technicality. Not my fault you couldn't live with what you'd become. I was acquitted, Dalton's shout echoed off the courtyard walls. Cleared of all charges. You testified false against me. Acquitted because Sheriff Turnbull took your $500 bribe. Didn't make you innocent. Just made you free to keep killing. And you did. Killed my student Connor Hayes. Killed this woman's husband, Marcus Redstone. How many others, Silas? How many people died so you could pretend to be respectable? The crowd was riveted. This was the kind of confrontation people would talk about for years. Horace Webb tried to intervene, his voice carrying false reasonableness. Gentlemen, please. This is a civilized gathering. We can discuss these matters through proper channels. Ayanna cut him off with surgical precision. Proper channels, like the proper channels that ignored my husband's report 3 months ago, that dismissed his evidence of your crimes, that signed false warrants while the real murderers walk free in expensive suits. She turned back to the crowd, addressing them directly now, making each person in that courtyard complicit in what happened next. Marcus Redstone discovered illegal mining operations on land the United States government promised to protect. Treaty land, sacred land. He reported this to federal authorities. He had evidence, names, dates, amounts of gold stolen. She held the journal higher, making sure everyone could see it. 1 week after making his report, he was murdered, shot from behind. And now they hunt me, not for justice, but for silence. Because I carry his documentation. Because I am witness to truths they want buried. A voice from the back of the crowd froze everyone in place. She's telling the truth. Every word of it. The crowd turned as one organism. Pike Thornton stepped forward from where he had been standing, disguised as a servant. 38 years old, former Confederate soldier, Dalton's lieutenant for 3 years. The man who knew where all the bodies were buried because he had helped dig the graves. Dalton's face went white. Absolute betrayal. Pike, he said, his voice dangerous. You're drunk, confused. This woman has poisoned your mind. Pike ignored him, speaking directly to Marshal Crawford and the assembled crowd. My name is Pike Thornton. I've worked for Silas Dalton for 3 years. I was there. I know what happened, and I'm tired of living with it. He pulled a ledger from inside his jacket. Worn leather, filled with damning details. Marcus Redstone discovered our operation in the Chiricahua Mountains. We were extracting gold ore from Apache sacred land. Land protected by federal treaty. We hauled out approximately $200,000 worth of gold over 18 months. The crowd gasped. $200,000, a fortune beyond imagination for most of them. The equivalent of $5.2 million in future money. Pike continued, his voice growing stronger with each confession. Dalton paid Horace Webb $15,000 to provide false mineral rights documents, paid Indian agent Morrison $5,000 to allow access to reservation land, paid Judge Harrison $500 to sign off on the paperwork. Webb's face went gray. Morrison started edging toward the exit. Judge Harrison looked around desperately for support that was not coming. When Marcus Redstone reported us to federal authorities, Dalton ordered the hit. I was standing right there when he said it. Can't let some Indian scout ruin 3 years of work, kill him, make it look like an Apache raid. Pike's voice dropped, heavy with guilt he could no longer carry. I was there when they shot him. June 15th. 5 miles outside Tucson on the trail. Tom Barlow pulled the trigger. Jake Reeves held Mrs. Redstone back, made her watch, made sure she understood what happens to people who threaten Dalton's operation. Ayanna's face showed the pain of hearing it confirmed. The moment her husband died, described by one of the men who had made it happen. The crowd erupted. Shocked murmurs became shouts. Outrage spreading like wildfire. Dalton tried one last time to regain control. He's lying, trying to save himself. I'll have you hung for this, Pike. I kept records, Pike interrupted, holding up the ledger. Insurance, payment ledgers, shipment manifests, telegraph messages between you and Webb. Every bribe documented, every illegal transaction recorded. I'll testify to all of it. Full confession in exchange for reduced sentence. Pike's voice dropped, but somehow carried further in the shocked silence. And there's more. Worse than theft or murder. The gold wasn't just for Dalton's fortune. He was funding something bigger. Confederate sympathizer groups, former officers planning another uprising. The telegraphs prove it. Messages to contacts in Texas, Georgia, South Carolina. Dalton was preparing for another war. A new wave of shock rippled through the crowd. Not just crimes against property and persons, treason against the United States itself. Marshall Crawford's face hardened to stone. Treason, that's a federal capital offense. The twist was complete. Dalton's own man had turned witness. The empire of lies was collapsing from within. Marshall Crawford's hand moved to his gun. His voice carried the weight of federal authority. Silas Dalton, I'm placing you under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, theft of federal property, violation of treaty law, bribery of territorial officials, and we'll add about a dozen more charges once we get you in a cell. Dalton's mask shattered completely. The respectable businessman vanished, revealing the desperate criminal beneath. His hand dove inside his jacket, emerging with a small Derringer. .41 caliber, 2 shots. Barely a weapon for a man of Dalton's size, but deadly at close range. He aimed at Pike Thornton. You traitorous bastard! Lucas moved faster than conscious thought. His Colt cleared leather, smooth as water. The hammer came back. The trigger squeezed. The shot rang out like thunder in the enclosed courtyard. Dalton's gun hand exploded in blood and shattered bone. The Derringer spun away, clattering on the cobblestones. Dalton screamed, clutching his ruined hand. Then all hell broke loose. Hell broke. Dalton's 6 men threw off their disguises and drew weapons. The crowd screamed and scattered in every direction. Tables overturned. Champagne glasses shattered. Torches were knocked over, starting small fires in the decorative plants. Lucas took cover behind the fountain, his Colt tracking targets. 5 rounds left. Had to make them count. Jake Reeves came up shooting. Lucas fired twice. The first shot hit Jake's shoulder, spinning him around. The second missed as Jake dove behind a pillar. Tom Barlow appeared from the main entrance, revolver in hand. Lucas fired, hit him in the leg. Tom went down but kept shooting, bullets ricocheting off the fountain's stone base. Colt Mathis tried to circle around from the west. Lucas's 4th shot caught him in the other leg. Colt collapsed, still dangerous but immobilized. 1 round left in the Colt. Lucas's hand moved to reload. That was when he saw the man charging Ayanna. Wade Burton, one of Dalton's unnamed men, had drawn a knife instead of a gun. He rushed at Ayanna from her blind side, clearly believing an Apache woman would be helpless against a white man with a blade. He learned differently. Ayanna sidestepped his lunge with the fluid grace of someone who had been trained in combat from childhood. Her grandmother had not just taught her medicine and survival. Desba had been a warrior in the Apache Wars. She had taught her granddaughter to fight. Ayanna grabbed Wade's knife arm with both hands, used his momentum against him, executed a perfect hip throw that sent him crashing to the cobblestones. The knife skittered away. She picked it up in one smooth motion and stood over him, the blade pointed at his throat. I am not what you think I am, she said. Her voice carried no anger, just fact. Wade stayed down, the fight gone out of him. Marshall Crawford joined the battle, his service revolver, barking orders and gunpowder. He shot one of Dalton's remaining men. The others saw federal authority entering the fight and made quick calculations. Fighting territorial guards was one thing. Fighting a United States Marshal was a hanging offense. 2 of them dropped their weapons and raised their hands. The gunfight lasted less than 90 seconds. When the smoke cleared, 2 of Dalton's men lay dead. 4 were wounded and captured. 2 had surrendered. The rest of the crowd was pressed against the walls, terrified and thrilled in equal measure. Dalton himself had used the chaos to grab a civilian woman, a merchant's wife who had been standing too close. His ruined hand still bled, but his left arm wrapped around her throat. She whimpered in terror. Anyone follow, Sheeties. Dalton's voice was ragged with pain and desperation. I'm walking out of here. Lucas aimed but could not take the shot. The woman was in the way. Too much risk of hitting her. Dalton backed toward the building interior, dragging his hostage. He disappeared through a doorway into the labyrinth of corridors beyond. Lucas looked at Crawford. Secure the courtyard. I'm going after him. Ayanna was already moving. Not alone. We finish this together. Crawford nodded. Go. I'll handle his men and get these people to safety. Lucas and Ayanna pursued into the darkened corridors. They could hear Dalton ahead, his breathing harsh and pained. The woman's sobs echoed off adobe walls. The trail led deeper into the building, through narrow passages lit only by the occasional oil lamp. Lucas moved with his Colt reloaded and ready. Ayanna held the knife she had taken from Wade, comfortable with the weight of it. They found them in the records room, a large space filled with shelves of territorial archives and legal documents. One lamp on a desk cast inadequate light, creating more shadows than illumination. Dalton stood against the far wall. He had released the woman who ran past Lucas and Ayanna without looking back. Now it was just the three of them. Predator and prey, reversing roles in the darkness. Dalton picked up a letter opener from the desk. 8 inches of steel, a desperate weapon for a desperate man. His ruined right hand hung useless at his side, still bleeding. But his left hand gripped the improvised blade with enough strength to kill if he got close enough. "You destroyed me, Garrett." The words came out half scream, half sip. "I had a ranch, respect, a future, a life. You took it all with your self-righteous honesty and integrity." Lucas held his gun steady, aimed at Dalton's chest. "I reported crimes. You destroyed yourself." "I fought for the Confederacy." Dalton's voice cracked with emotion, bleeding through rage. 4 years of war, lost everything when we lost. The ranch was my chance to rebuild. You took that too. Then came the revelation. The crack in the villain's armor that made him human instead of monster. You know what the worst part was? Dalton's voice dropped to something almost like grief. You reminded me of my son, Benjamin. He died at Antietam, 20 years old. Same age as your Connor Hayes. Same stupid ideals. Same belief that honor mattered more than survival. Lucas had not known this. The information hit like a physical blow. Dalton continued, words pouring out like poison, finally lanced. Benjamin would have been like you, would have testified against his own father if he thought it was right. He died for the noble cause, left me with nothing. His eyes were wild now, reflecting lamplight like an animal's. When I saw you training that boy Connor, I saw Benjamin. I hated you for having what I'd lost. When you betrayed me, taking Connor was justice. My pain for yours. Fair trade. Lucas understood then. Dalton was not just evil, he was broken. Destroyed by loss and twisted by grief into something monstrous. It did not excuse what he had done, but it explained it. Your son died with honor, Lucas said quietly. Connor died with honor. You dishonor both their memories with what you have become. Honor? Dalton laughed, bitter and broken. Honor doesn't feed you, doesn't rebuild after war, doesn't bring back the dead. Honor is what fools tell themselves while the world takes everything they love. He charged then, the letter opener raised, all his rage and pain and loss focused into one final desperate attack. Lucas could have shot him. One bullet, center mass, end it clean. But Connor's voice echoed in his memory. How do I know if I'm doing right? And Lucas's answer. Treat people the way you'd want to be treated, even when it's hard. Lucas stepped aside from Dalton's charge, letting momentum carry the older man past. Then he pistol-whipped him with controlled force. The Colt's barrel caught Dalton behind the ear, enough to stun, not to kill. Dalton dropped to his knees, the letter opener clattering from his grip. Lucas stood over him, gun aimed, finger on the trigger. The shot would be justified, righteous even. Dalton had murdered Connor, had murdered Marcus, had destroyed lives and stolen land and corrupted justice. One bullet would balance all of it. But Ayanna's voice cut through the red haze of vengeance. Dalton, look at me. Dalton raised his head, saw the Apache woman he had hunted, saw her standing tall and unbroken despite everything he had done. Ayanna's voice was calm, powerful, the voice of someone who had found strength in survival. You killed my husband. You killed Lucas's student. You have stolen land, murdered innocent people, corrupted justice. For what? Gold, power, revenge for your own losses? She moved closer, unafraid. You think you've won something? You've already lost everything that matters. Marcus's truth will be known. Connor's death will be avenged. Your empire is ashes. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But more than that, You brought Lucas and me together. Your hate created our partnership. We are stronger because of what you did to us. You failed even in your revenge." Dalton's expression crumbled, the truth of her words cutting deeper than any blade. Lucas made his choice. He lowered the gun, stepped back, extended his hand to Ayanna. "Your husband wanted justice, not revenge," he said. "So did Connor. We give them justice." Ayanna nodded. Together they looked down at Dalton, broken and bleeding on the floor of the records room. "You will face trial, Ayanna said. "You will be judged by law, not by our anger. This is what separates us from you. We choose what is right over what feels good." Marshal Crawford entered with deputies. They hauled Dalton to his feet, manacled his wrist despite his ruined hand. "Silas Dalton," Crawford said formally, "you are under arrest for more crimes than I can name right now. We'll sort out the complete list once you're in federal custody." As they dragged him away, Dalton looked back at Lucas one last time. "You're a fool, Garrett. Honor doesn't win. Money wins. Power wins." Lucas met his eyes without flinching. "If that's true, why are you in chains and I'm walking free?" Dalton had no answer. They took him into the night, toward a cell and a trial and a rope that waited at the end of it all. In the courtyard, order was slowly being restored. The fires had been extinguished. The wounded were being tended. The dead were being covered. Marshal Crawford addressed what remained of the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, Ayanna Redstone stands falsely accused. All charges are dropped. The warrant is void. She is cleared of any wrongdoing. Furthermore, I apologize on behalf of the territory of Arizona for the injustice she suffered." Some in the crowd applauded. Others looked ashamed. A few left quickly, embarrassed by their earlier assumptions. Ayanna stood tall, accepting the apology with dignity, but not forgetting what it had cost to receive it. In a quiet corner away from the chaos, Lucas and Ayanna found a moment alone. "It's over," Lucas said. "We did it." "We did it," Ayanna agreed. "Together, as Marcus wanted." Lucas took both her hands in his. The question she had asked at the river needed an answer. "You asked if I would stay, not from duty or guilt, but because I want to." He met her eyes, amber brown and fierce and beautiful. "Ayanna, I want to wake up tomorrow and see you there. I want to hear you teach me Apache words I'll never pronounce right. I want to watch you heal people with your grandmother's medicine. I want to build something with you. Ranch, home, family, life, whatever you'll give me." His voice roughened with emotion. "I don't want your body. I don't want you as an obligation. I want your partnership, your mind, your strength, your tomorrow and every day after." Ayanna's eyes glistened in the torchlight. "That is the answer I hoped for." They kissed then, finally, earned through fire and blood and trust, built one honest answer at a time. Not lustful, deep, a commitment made in full knowledge of what they were choosing. The crowd did not exist. The burning courtyard faded. There was only this moment. Two people who had lost everything finding something neither expected. When they parted, Ayanna smiled. "In Apache way, we are married now. We chose each other publicly. We fought as one. That is marriage. Then I'm honored to be your husband. And I'm honored to be your wife. We will have an Apache ceremony when Dalton hangs," she continued. "And when the law permits us, a legal marriage too. But in my heart, in the way of my people, you are my husband from this moment forward." Lucas pulled her close. "In my heart, you've been my wife since you placed your hand in mine in that arroyo." Marshal Crawford approached, respectfully waiting until they acknowledged him. "There's paperwork and a reward. Federal government pays for recovery of stolen property. $5,000, standard procedure." Lucas started to refuse, but Ayanna cut him off. "We will take it, to build a new life. Marcus would want that." The frame story dissolved back into existence. Colorado, 1947. The porch where it all began. Daniel sat forward, processing what he had heard. "So that question, do you just want my body? That changed everything?" Lucas nodded. "One question, one honest answer. Everything we built came from that moment." Ayanna added, "Your grandfather could have lied, could have taken what I feared, could have abandoned me when danger came. He chose differently every time. Not because of who he was born as, because of who he chose to be. Daniel looked at his grandparents, married 70 years, still holding hands on the porch of a ranch built from nothing but integrity and partnership. Michael asked me before he left, Daniel said quietly. Asked how to be brave. I didn't know what to tell him. Lucas leaned forward. Bravery is choosing truth over comfort, justice over revenge, partnership over power, every single day, not just once, every day for 70 years. That's what makes a real man? That, Lucas said, in giving honest answers to hard questions. But what happened to them all? Daniel asked. Dalton, the others who helped him. Lucas drew on his pipe. Silas Dalton hanged March 18th, 78. Federal court in Tucson. Treason and murder. Horace Webb got 25 years in federal prison. Died there in 91. Pneumonia took him. Indian Agent Morrison served 10 years. Released in 88. Died within the year. Bitter and alone. And Pike Thornton, the one who turned? Kept his word, Lucas said. Testified fully at trial, got his reduced sentence. Moved to California, started over. Lived honest. He wrote me twice before he passed in 1903. Said watching us choose justice over revenge gave him the courage to do the same. The screen door opened. A woman emerged carrying a tray with 3 glasses of lemonade. Sarah Garrett Chen, 68 years old, moved with the quiet grace of someone who had inherited strength from both parents. Silver streaked through her black hair, pulled back in a simple braid. Her eyes were Ayanna's amber brown. Her steady presence was pure Lucas. Still telling the Arroyo story, Father? She set down the tray with a knowing smile. Daniel needed to hear it, Ayanna said simply. Sarah looked at her son with the directness of a woman who had spent a lifetime navigating between 2 worlds and finding strength in both. Your grandfather built this ranch on 320 acres of homestead land. Federal grant in 77. We added 200 more over the decades. Raised horses, grew medicinal herbs. Everything you see came from that $5,000 reward and 70 years of honest work. She touched Lucas's shoulder. He trained 15 young men over the years, taught them ranching the way Connor should have lived to learn. Every one of them left here knowing that character matters more than color. Ayanna added, I worked as healer, taught Apache medicine to anyone willing to learn, testified before Congress in 1890 about reservation conditions. They did not want to listen to an Apache woman married to a white man, but they had no choice. I had documentation they could not ignore, forced changes in federal and Indian policy. Lucas smiled at his wife. You were fierce that day. 3 senators tried to dismiss you. You cited treaty law better than their own lawyers. Grandmother Desba taught me never to retreat from truth, Ayanna said. Daniel looked out at the ranch spread below. The corrals where horses grazed peacefully. The garden where medicinal plants grew in careful rows that blended Apache wisdom with modern cultivation. The bunkhouse where workers of every background had found employment based solely on their willingness to work honest. The barn with Twin Springs Ranch, established 1877, painted across weathered wood. All of this, he said slowly, from one question and one answer. From choosing integrity when lying would have been easier, Lucas corrected gently. The sun set over the Colorado mountains. The ranch spread below them, 320 acres of legacy built on one moment of integrity in an Arizona arroyo. Daniel boarded his train the next morning. Lucas and Ayanna stood on the platform, hands intertwined, watching him go. Do you think he understood? Ayanna asked. He understood what matters. The rest he'll learn by living. They walked back to their ranch together, still partners, still choosing each other. The question asked in desperation and answered in honor had built a lifetime, and the answer given honestly 70 years ago in a desert arroyo still echoed true. No, I'm not here for that. The end.